Sorry about that, folks. Someone called me on my phone, and uh, that interrupted the video feed. Still trying to work out the bugs of how to do all that sort of stuff. Um, okay, so this is part two. Let me pick up where I left off. Um, yeah. Okay. So look over on page 376. So yes, we're seeing so far putting the veil on. It's made Hooper a better preacher, made him a better pastor, and now we're going to see it's at the end of his life that he is absolutely much more deeply tapped into an ultimate truth of life to a greater degree than other people around him. He's understood and accepted a fundamental quality of life, which is this black veil, that we have this inability to really understand the truth of ourselves or the truth of other people. Okay, so 376. Yeah, very, very bottom of 376, last paragraph here. So he's on his deathbed, and everyone's still freaked out, and so these are his final words here. "Why do you tremble at me alone?" cried he, turning his veiled face round the circle of pale spectators. "Tremble also at each other. Have men avoided me, and women shown no pity, and children screamed and fled, only for my black veil? What but the mystery which it obscurely typifies has made this piece of crape so awful? When the friend shows his inmost heart to his friend, his lover to his best beloved, when man does not vainly shrink from the eye of his Creator, loathsomely treasuring up the secret of his sin, then deem me a monster, for the symbol beneath which I have lived and die. I look around me, and lo, on every visage, a black veil." Wow, okay. So he understands this truth of himself. We humans are at our core, we're sinners. We're poor, mortal sinners. All Hooper's doing is he's wearing the veil, so he's being honest about this quality. And he looks around him, and all these people are so self-righteous. Oh, look at Reverend Hooper, what a freak he is, blah, blah, blah. And Hooper's saying, no, you're a freak too, and you just won't admit it. You see what I'm getting at? So, and I think some of you folks were saying this, that yes, Hooper creeped everyone out, but if you're creeped out by Hooper, then you're kind of a hypocrite. And that seems to be what Hooper is saying here. Okay, so far so good then, right? Don't judge. Don't judge other people. But again, Hawthorne is much, much, much more slippery than that. He's more complicated than that. And there's a significant other side to all of this, that Hooper is being pathological somehow in his behavior. Okay, so if you look over on page 372, you'll see this other side. And Hawthorne just so skillfully weaves the pros and cons of the black veil all through here seamlessly. Okay, so 372. Okay, so so he's criticizing people who can't accept him for wearing the veil. But look at what happens here, okay? About the end of that paragraph, first paragraph on 372. At that instant, catching a glimpse of his figure in the looking glass is a mirror, the black veil involved his own spirit in the horror with which it overwhelmed all others. His frame shuddered. His lips grew white. He spilt the untasted wine upon the carpet and rushed forth into the darkness, for the earth too had on her black veil. Wow. Okay, so he's looking in the mirror. He sees himself with a black veil, and he's creeped out by his own reflection. Okay? So how deeply then has he really been able to accept his own sinful nature? He wants everyone else around him to accept his sinful nature, but he can't accept it himself. So, the question we have to ask, okay, Reverend Hooper, who's the hypocrite? You're creeped out. You're mad at people who are creeped out by you. Well, guess what, pal? You're creeped out by yourself. So you see, it's places like this where it starts to get kind of complicated. And there's a wonderful bit of symbolism in here. I believe he's at a wedding here. Yeah, he's at a wedding. And so there's something very biblical going on in this passage. Maybe you remember I think it's Jesus's first miracle that he performs when he is at a wedding, and he turns the water into wine. And so it's an image of sacrament and Holy Communion. And of course, a very good and positive, miraculous thing. And so look at what happens here. He's at a wedding, and he has this cup of wine, and he's so freaked out by his sinful nature, he spills the wine. So yeah, I think you see where I'm going with that, the symbolic quality of this. He can't partake in the restorative power of the divinity, building up sense of fellowship, even with his own congregation. So yeah, it seems like it's he himself that has the problem, maybe not everybody else. Okay, and then over on page 374, this is an example I referred to a lot in our online discussion. I think this is really important. 374. So here's Hooper, and he's had so he's become a better clergyman, everything else, and he's onto this fundamental truth. He's wearing this veil. And so, if people then can relate to him more thoroughly, okay, great, right? But again, it's Hawthorne. It's much more complex than that. Look at what happens with his own fiancée. 374, about 5 lines from the top. "Have patience with me, Elizabeth," cried he passionately. "Do not desert me, though this veil must be between us here on earth. Be mine, and hereafter there shall be no veil over my face, no darkness between our souls. It is but a mortal veil. It is not for eternity. Oh, you know how lonely I am, and how frightened to be alone behind my black veil. Do not leave me in this miserable obscurity forever." Then Elizabeth says, "Lift the veil but once, and look me in the face," said she. "Never, it cannot be," replied Mr. Hooper. "Then farewell," said Elizabeth. So yeah, he's not willing to really show who he is to his own fiancée. And they're not married. It says in there somewhere his plighted wife. That means that they're engaged. So he's not able or willing to really try to show truly who he is to her. And so she's like, I'm done. Goodbye. How many times have you ever been in a relationship where, never mind, not you, anyone, people are in a relationship, say, and it's just like, gosh, you're not really letting me get to know you. And we're not growing in intimacy. So I'm sorry, I need something else. So, yeah, Reverend Hooper seems to have intimacy problems. I think that's what I'm saying here, or what Hawthorne seems to be saying. Okay, then if you look over on page, three, yeah, just next page over, 375. Very last line of 375 and over to 376. All through life, that piece of crape had hung between him and the world. It separated him from cheerful brotherhood and woman's love, and kept him in that saddest of all prisons, his own heart. And still it lay upon his face, as if to deepen the gloom of his darksome chamber and shade him from the sunshine of eternity. So, yeah, poor Reverend Hooper. It seems like he's kind of a sad, tragic figure. Okay, so should Hooper be wearing the veil or should he not be? I mean, that's one fundamental question. Well, it gets even more complex. Okay, there's another fundamental point of obscurity here, and it's this. You ready for this? This one's even more complicated. Ready? So hold on to your hats, folks. Is there really a veil there? Did Hooper really show up one day and put a black veil over his face? Or is Hawthorne writing this story all somehow symbolically? That Reverend Hooper is meant to be a kind of an allegory. An allegory is a kind of a symbolic story. Is Reverend Hooper simply meant to be a symbol for all of us? Every single one of us have that black veil on, symbolically. Because again, impenetrable mystery is a fundamental category of life. We are all strangers to ourselves. We are all strangers to each other. We don't really know who and what God is. We don't really know what existence itself is supposed to all be about. Here I am on planet Earth, and I don't even really know what I'm supposed to be. Why am I here? I don't know, and I don't even know how to know, okay? So that black veil then is a symbol then. Hooper wearing the veil, he's not really wearing a veil. Hawthorne is simply using that as an example or a symbol for how to talk about all people as somehow being trapped in mystery. And what's the answer to it? Your guess is as good as mine. Hawthorne himself doesn't know. He's just throwing us this mysterious story so we can sit around and scratch our heads over it for decades and decades, which is exactly what people have done. Okay, let me tease this out just a little bit more. Okay, so if the veil really is, okay, let me come at it another way. If the veil is symbolic, then it would mean that we are all as human beings somehow isolated from each other. You know, we're all prone to loneliness or, you know, whatever, okay? But if it really is just a story about one man who showed up with a veil on his face, it's a real human being in a real community, and he shows up with this veil on, then I think we're to read the story in a different way, which is Hawthorne's trying to tell us just to lighten up. You know, yes, sin is real. Yes, darkness is real. Yes, evil is real. But don't be so obsessed with that. You know, here's Hooper. He's at a wedding, and he can't even enjoy himself. He can't even receive the wine as a form of redemption and communion. He can't receive it because he's so freaked out about how sinful and frail he is. So this is, in fact, a theme that shows up in Hawthorne again and again, and that is lighten up Y'all are just too uptight. You Puritans in particular are way uptight. You know, you think someone's starting to speak gibberish, and oh my gosh, they're a witch, and you got to kill them. You know, y'all just need to chill out a little bit, okay? That is a theme that shows up in Hawthorne from time to time. As much as we like Hooper and we admire what he's doing, his spiritual courage, Hawthorne's saying, just stop it. Just stop it. Don't even go there. Okay, so it just comes back to again and again, impenetrable mystery. Okay, so let me just wrap up on this note then. Here I am saying there's no answer to this. There's no one fundamental interpretation here to this story. And I can imagine what you're thinking. Well, gee, Richardson, we were hoping we'd listen to this lecture and have a better idea of what Hawthorne's going on so that when we can go and take the exam, we can get a good grade. Okay, so let me address that. When you take the exam on Hawthorne, if you can take one side, one interpretation or the other. There's no one that I read in any of the discussions that you did that just had a wrong answer. Nobody. I think what I would encourage you to do is while you're saying, yes, I like Hooper, or no, I don't like Hooper, fine. Either one is okay. Just be sure that you understand the complexity in the story, that impenetrable mystery is at the root of this story, and Hawthorne is not giving us any simple answers. Okay? That's Hawthorne. No simple answers. Okay. I think we'll end on that note. Oh, well, just one other thing I would say. You're going to be getting into looking at Hawthorne's story, The Birthmark. As you're reading The Birthmark, consider, is that same theme of, gee, y'all who are so focused on human imperfection, y'all need to lighten up. Does that lesson seem to apply to Aylmer? Does he need to lighten up in the same way that Hooper needs to lighten up? Okay? All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate your listening, and see you soon. Okay. Be well, everybody.